Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to another Paint and Ramble. In this episode, I'm going to be painting this very large miniature. Well, not too large, but definitely bigger than your standard 28 to 32 millimeter. This one is from 1985 Games. They sent this to me. They asked me if I would, they liked the Paint and Ramble, and so they reached out to me and told me they had some new resin miniatures and asked me if I had a preference. I looked through them. I think they have like about 10 or 15. And this one caught my eye. This is called the Candle Priest. But it's a really interesting character. Is he good? Is he evil? I don't know. All I know is he's very heavily robed. He's wearing bells all over him. He's got a big one on his back here, and then he's got a bunch of little ones over his shoulders. And looks like it's hard to say what's in the little incense. It's probably incense, the little thing he's swinging. But I'm going to paint this one. I'm going to paint this one up right now, and we're going to talk about Kickstarter. It could be a sore spot for some. For others, it is just a never-ending source of gaming content and materials and all kinds of stuff. So let me get to the tabletop. We'll paint this up, and I'll tell you some of my thoughts on Kickstarter. All right, everybody, I'm going to start painting on this, and today's topic is Kickstarter. And, you know, I welcome your comments below in the video's comment section, and I will tell you that as far as I'm concerned, Kickstarter's not a new thing. I don't remember when Kickstarter started, but I will say that Kickstarter is not a new phenomenon. It's had plenty of time to get the bugs out, so to speak. But what I want to talk about really is, as a gamer, you're a gamer, I'm a gamer, what are the advantages of Kickstarter? What are the disadvantages? I mean, there are disadvantages. There are drawbacks to getting our gaming stuff from this particular site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up by saying and admitting that I kickstart, not recently, but I have kickstarted a lot of projects. I'm probably not going to tell you how many because it would make me sad to look it up. It would probably shock me, might shock you. I have been backing Kickstarter since way back when it started, and again, I don't know what that year was, but I do know that when I started doing Kickstarter, it was very limited. I used to back a lot of electronic stuff. I used to be really heavily involved in making, like Make Magazine, and doing electronic kits and DIY and stuff like that. And I still am. And so I would go to Kickstarter because a lot of times you could find some really, really interesting electronic kits. You could find tools that were really, really helpful. I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. Oh, I know what it was. One of the first projects I ever backed was a fume extractor for soldering. It was some kind of fancy one. I don't really remember what was so fancy about it, but at the time it seemed pretty fancy to have. And I did not like the fumes. I didn't like wearing the mask a lot. And it felt like, hey, something I could use. And so when I finally got my hands on it, it was a bit of a letdown. It was very cheap. It was obviously manufactured somewhere in China. The company that had done it, I believe, had outsourced it to them for manufacturing. And, it was very inexpensive to back, and I got what I paid for. And, I think that should have probably been one of my earliest warning signs about Kickstarter, but I was so taken with this site. And at the time, if I remember right, there weren't a lot of games. There really wasn't a lot of war games or role-playing game content. It was mainly, I'm trying to remember. I know there was like some few board games, a lot of card games, but it really had not taken. It had really not hit big like it has now. And back then, I don't even remember. I'm doing this from memory, but if I recall, the categories didn't even allow for like tabletop versus board games versus role playing. There wasn't a lot of differential in the search engine for it. Basically, you just had to sort of, if I remember right, you just sort of thumbed through it, just page by page by page, seeing if there was anything interesting. Now they did have some sort of categories or some way to filter, but it really wasn't all that great. I do remember being sort of frustrated with the Kickstarter, and realizing that it wasn't there yet. And again, it was very early on. So, now I don't know how many years later, I've backed a number of Kickstarters. If I had to say what the most type of Kickstarted project I've ever backed, or I've backed in all the years, is, I would probably say that it is definitely RPG related. Probably 5e. A lot of 5e projects, and by that I mean either adventures or accessory books or something for Dungeons and Dragons that I just at the time felt I needed. And that is one of the topics I wanted to talk about during this time, was that common conception of, do you need it or do you want it? Because for the longest time I was in the want it stage. I honestly, there have been very, very few projects that I've backed on Kickstarter that I needed. And by the word need, I mean they would have saved me time or energy in like as a DM or something like that. There is a very distinct line for me when it comes to need versus want. And I don't know if you've hit that point yet, but probably I would say maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. No, it was more than that. It was probably about 2 years ago. I quickly reached a point where I took a step back. I said, you know what? I can't keep doing this. Every time I turn around, there's something new that I've just got to have, right? Not need it, want it. And Kickstarter's not cheap. It used to be you could get things really, people would pass on costs because they were really trying to kickstart a company off the ground. These days, companies use it to basically fund production runs. I mean, the company is existing. It's been around. It's a solid company. It's not a startup, but they use Kickstarter as a way to raise the funds. And they basically do this to see if there's a want, right? They have number crunchers who have done the number crunching and said, okay, we're going to need X number of backers at this price, so we'll set the minimum backing goal to this number, which means if it doesn't get funded, we haven't lost anything, or maybe not much. And if it does fund, we have covered our costs and maybe made a little profit on it. But that's not the original, at least as I understand it, that is not the original purpose of Kickstarter. Kickstarter was there to, and again, I may be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong in the comments and point me to some information that tells me I'm wrong here. But I seem to recall that when Kickstarter began, it was really for the little guy, the little business, the garage business, the guy who needed to make a production run of, say, 200 or maybe even 50 of something to get started, right? Kickstart the company and get it off the ground and get things delivered. And maybe, just maybe, you would make enough profit and get enough word of mouth that you could make a second run and you would start a small business, right? I mean, and there are success stories with Kickstarter of companies that did that. And I'm sure I know a few. I'm sure I have helped a few with my kickstarting funds. But lately, and by lately, I mean in the last few years, I have really cut back on my Kickstarters. Now, I will frequently kickstart or back something of a friend or someone who I've been with for a while that I really do like their stuff, even though necessarily I may not need it. I do it to support them, right? I mean, I've watched their company grow and I've watched their products expand, and I just want them to thrive and survive. And so I stick with them, even though I may never use their product. And that's a bit of a stretch. I try to use everything or play every game at least once that I back on Kickstarter, but that's not always the case. Tell the truth. Be honest with yourself. How many Kickstarter projects have you backed that you got in the mail, you opened up, you looked at, and were like, ooh, and then it went on a shelf and you haven't touched it since? And I'm going to be honest, lots. I've done lots of those, and it's frustrating because I realize how much money that I have spent on Kickstarter over the years and for things that I'm looking at. I'm in my workshop and I'm looking at things. I'm going, yep, that was a Kickstarter. Yep, that was a Kickstarter. And so when we moved to this new house, I made a point. I made a very solid point to my. I stuck to my guns that I was going to start eBaying some of my stuff just to get rid of it because it was sitting on shelves. And I couldn't tell you how many I've done, but I've done quite a few. I started off with a lot of my 5e content. Now, those of you who've been following me and have listened to me, you know that I've sort of walked away and backed away from D&D 5th edition. I like to play this old school game called Old School Essentials. I'm totally into it. And I like 5e. This is not a critique of 5e. It's just I reached a point where it was no longer engaging me. It wasn't giving me what I wanted in terms of a fantasy RPG game. So one of the first things I did was I went and I eBayed a lot of my collector edition covers, the ones that had the special covers. And I didn't know. I just put them out there, and then I started noticing that, oh, wow, people really want these because the bids would just be crazy. There's a Facebook group called RPG Auctions, I believe that's what it's called, or Auction RPG or something like that. And I've put a lot of stuff on there. And I have been able to recover in some cases, I've recovered much more than I put into it for a Kickstarter. Or like, for instance, those D&D books that I bought at the store, they made me back what I paid for it plus some. And some of that money I set aside for like improvements to my workshop, and then some I set aside as strictly, to buy more games. I mean, come on, admit it. If somebody hands you some free money, right, that you didn't have before, and it came from your hobby, it's kind of easy to say, well, I wouldn't have gotten that money if I hadn't have sold my gaming stuff, so I might as well just go ahead and spend it on some more gaming stuff. And it makes logical sense, at least to me. I'm very logical about that. But yeah, I mean, I used it to go and buy and kickstart or buy some gaming material that I would use. And that's the thing. I am very careful these days when I decide I want to buy a book or a game. I really do ask myself, like, okay, are you really gonna play this game? Even if I only expect to maybe play it a few times, if I'm going to get enjoyment out of it. And now listen, let's look at this from a logical point of view. How many of you spend $20 or more to go see a 2-hour movie in the theater, right? I mean, maybe you don't. I don't do that much anymore. I don't know when the last time I went to a theater, and that's probably me showing my age, because I know that a lot of people still enjoy going to a theater. But I don't. I don't like the crowds. I don't like the cell phone glares from people checking their Facebooks or their Twitter or whatever, Instagrams every 5 minutes. It just ruins the experience. I've been in actual movies here in Atlanta where fights broke out on a Friday night, like 2 kids or 2 adults got into a fight here in Atlanta. And I just long story short, I don't do movies anymore, and I don't miss them. So I bring this up because, it's not uncommon if you go see a movie on a Friday night matinee, or, not a matinee, just an evening film, you're going to spend $20 or more. That's not counting the food, right? You're going to spend $20 on that movie for 2 hours. You don't get that $20 back. So the way I look at it, and the way I've always looked at it, is if I'm going to spend $20 on a book or something, if I at least read the book and get something out of it, maybe I get an idea for a game I'm going to run, or maybe I get some inspiration for something, then I consider that money sort of well spent. I mean, I would have spent it on a movie, so here I spent it on something that's actually going to benefit one of my hobbies, right? Now, a lot of times I will back things like miniatures, 3D files, things like that on Kickstarter, and I could buy them, but I prefer to kickstart them because with those kind of things, a lot of times I'm supporting the creator. I want them to continue to do what they want to do. So I back it knowing that it may be months or even a year or more before I get those STL files or those miniatures. But I want that behavior. I want to encourage them to keep doing that. But lately, I have totally ceased backing any kickstarting game or project that is more than, I'm gonna make this up, probably about 5 or 6 months. If it's not going to deliver within 6 months, I don't back it. Now, the problem with that is sometimes you miss out on the Kickstarter exclusives, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I have been very diligent in not backing projects that are going to deliver, I don't know, 8 months, a year out. If it's more than a year, forget it. Even if I absolutely need it because it's going to benefit me, I will wait to see if it actually gets released, and then I'll try to buy it either on eBay or in an online store if they make them available. If it's something that is only exclusive to Kickstarter and you're never going to see it again, that may sway me. It also depends on the reputation of the person doing it. I'm not going to give somebody $50 or $100 for something that I might get a year from now. If they have a history of delivering on what they say they'll deliver, that weighs into it. So if somebody's going to deliver, say, 50 minis in a year, and I really want those because I'm going to use them in my war games or at my RPG table, then I'm willing to possibly make an exception there and back them because I'm pretty confident that I'll get them. But I can't tell you the number of projects in the last year that have wowed me on the screen. But I've stuck to my guns and I've said, no, I'm not buying that because it's not going to deliver for a year. That's a year that I could have that money to do something else with. And I don't know. I don't think anything's going to change. I think companies are still going to keep using Kickstarter, and they're going to keep putting out these year-long deliveries. What was the one the other day? Hold on just one second. It was over a year. I did back it. It was the Mothership RPG box set. It's a year out. And granted, I have no concerns that a year from now when it's released, I'll be able to get those books that are part of it, right? I think there are some Kickstarter exclusives. I think there was a patch, which, But I backed it because I've played the game. I like the game. I want the creators to know they have my support. And so in that case, I was willing to give them, I think it was $59. I didn't back the big one. I backed the regular one. And in that case, I'm confident. I'm 90% confident they're going to get that product out. They've already released Mothership. It raised over $1 million, and it doesn't raise $1 million if people don't have confidence that they're going to get it. I think especially these days, there's so many people who are playing Mothership or have bought the original rulebook, and they're like, yes, I want more of this. You don't raise $1 million unless you have people who are believing that you are going to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. Now, long wait times. That's a key thing for me. That factors into my decision making. What else factors into my decision making? Well, these may or may not matter to you, but and these aren't in any particular order. I did write them on a list that I'm referencing on the screen in front of my taped up on a piece of paper. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to find a very light gray color, and I'm having trouble finding it. Come on now, where is it? Saddle right now. I want a very, very piece. That'll do. Sky gray will do. So the next thing is fulfillment issues. Well, okay, right now, if you turn on the news, you're hearing about all these cargo ships that are sitting off, anchored off port because there's not enough workers to get it on, to unload the ships, and then there's not enough workers to drive the trucks to get the material, the products to where they need to go. There's a lot of problems right now, and these are fulfillment issues, and it's trickling down. I backed a project. I just got an email from the company saying, "Listen, we're sorry, but we're going to be a little or a lot late on delivering because fulfillment issues, China issues, whatever." And I'm not here to go anti-China. We made that bed. We get all our stuff made there, and so what you're seeing right now, interestingly enough, is an uptick in purchases made from companies that are here in the United States, that are made in the USA. And so it's really interesting. I've seen a few Kickstarters impress upon that fact that, product X is being made here, or it's being printed here, or it's being done here. You won't have to worry about about products being delayed, blah blah blah. So there are companies that are using that as a means to sway backers to come and back our products. You won't have to wait forever to get your stuff. And it's smart. I mean, definitely, if you can promise it and deliver on it, if you're truly not having your stuff made elsewhere, that fulfillment is going to become a problem, then by all means, use it as a marketing tool to get people to come get your stuff. The news the other night reported that, or I saw a report that said that this Christmas, is going to be really tough for a lot of parents. It was more parent centric because they're talking about how toys and a lot of stuff are still either not shipped or sitting on a boat, and they're not going to make it to the stores, and kids are going to be crying. And so they were talking that about how on eBay we're going to have this, like, you're going to have these toys that are normally $50. They're going to be bidding on them. Parents are going to be bidding hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands of dollars to get them. And I am kind of glad my kids are not like that. We've always been a little cautious with them about Christmas, not expecting too much. And nowadays they're older, they want money, which that's easy. We make that here in the U.S. at least still. But it's really interesting because Kickstarters, it remains to be seen if people who backed things a year ago or 8 months ago, expecting an October, November, or even December delivery, I think we're going to come next month. I think we're going to have a lot of panicked backers who are like, "Where's my stuff? My kid wanted that, or my husband wanted that, or I wanted that," and it's going to get ugly. I think. I really do think that. Who knows? I could be wrong. But fulfillment issues is another factor that I used when I'm trying to determine if I want to back something. If it's a U.S. company and I know they're going to be making it here, then I probably would be likely to back it if I need it, right? If I don't want it, if I need it. So I know I check Kickstarter at least once a week for just things, and I see them on Facebook. I see people posting, "Oh, I just backed this and I backed that," and I'll check it out. But I've been really good about just holding my horses and not going crazy. And I think I've probably backed maybe 2 things in the last month or 2, which that may be a lot. I think a lot of people are like, "Whoa, I only back something once a year." Okay, I am fortunate in that the business I do, because I write for gaming, a lot of the stuff I buy, I can buy it for business purposes because either I'm reviewing it or I'm using it in my own business. But that's not always the case. That definitely is not the case for everybody. What else do I base my decisions when wanting to back something? Well, I already mentioned need it and want it. Now, one of the things under the want it is there's this thing called FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. Kickstarter is really, really good or bad, depending on how you look at it. They are really good at helping Kickstarter creators to market theirs. When you create a Kickstarter, for those of you who never created one, when you create a Kickstarter, you open up a whole database of articles and how-tos and helpful stuff from Kickstarter itself. And if you go and you read a lot of that, you'll start getting emails and newsletters and things like that. You'll have companies contacting you because they'll see that you've got a Kickstarter and they want to help you, right? But the Kickstarter stuff by itself, they have a large database of articles and how-tos on how to help your Kickstarter succeed, right? How to get funding. And one of those, which is, it's a boon for people who run Kickstarters, it's the fear of missing out, right? It's put things on there that they absolutely cannot, they might be exclusive. I mentioned earlier that we're going to talk about exclusives. Kickstarter exclusives are probably the key thing when it comes to fear of missing out. If you release a board game or an RPG or a war game, and you put in there that, oh, by the way, all backers will get this exclusive miniature or this exclusive map or something that will not be available after the Kickstarter ends, it has an effect. You may say, oh, I don't buy into that. And I used to say that too, but I do buy into it sometimes, and it aggravates me that I buy into it. So much so that I've gotten sort of not numb to it, I've gotten resistant to it. I look at what do I need versus what do I want. Like, for instance, with the Mothership RPG recently, there was a $59 base set. You get the 3 books, and I think you get whatever stretch goals are released. And we'll talk about stretch goals. So I backed that. But after that, there's like it's more than $100. I think it's more than $100. There's an option where it's basically everything. You get everything. And some of it is Kickstarter exclusive. You will not be available after the fact. And I don't like exclusives. I don't like them because obviously, for the first thing, a lot of people miss Kickstarters. I've been running a Kickstarter myself for Delver magazine, and I'm only on issue number 2. And it seems like at least once a week, maybe twice a week, I see a comment on Facebook or somebody post a comment of like, what is that? I didn't even know about this. And so I've made my magazines available for purchase, outside of Kickstarter. So if you did miss it, you should be able to get it at least for a little while. I don't know how long I'll keep selling like issue 1. I'll sell them until I sell out. And then if the demand's there, maybe I'll order a small batch. But the exclusives really bother me because I can't keep track of all the Kickstarters. There are Kickstarters every day popping up, and I don't know how many I miss. I don't sit there and go through the RPG category. Maybe I should, but I don't have time. And if I did, all it would do is just make me realize that I don't have enough money, and there is way too much stuff that I don't need. And again, I may spend money. I may find something that I must have, not want it or not need it, or what's the opposite? Not want it, I need it, right? That's the fear, is that, you spend too long on Kickstarter, you start finding things that you just got to have. I mentioned fear of missing out. Well, that's a key one. I mean, if you put something there that if somebody doesn't jump now and back now, they're not going to get another opportunity. Believe it or not, a certain percentage of backers will say, well, you got me. And they'll go and they'll post a comment of like, oh, you got me with that. I got to have that. And the problem now is it's fed the monster, right? Kickstarter knows this, and they tell every Kickstarter company, look, if you're going to do this, you need to offer something that cannot be got, found or purchased at a later time. Now, a lot of companies have gotten wise to this, and what they'll do is they'll put a disclaimer on there that says, okay, this is not available outside of Kickstarter. But they give themselves a way out, because if they run another Kickstarter, they'll post it on there. They'll say, okay, did you miss this in Kickstarter 1? Well, it was a Kickstarter exclusive. Here's our next Kickstarter. You can get it. I've seen some people go, whoa, wail, oh, that's cheating. You made it seem like we could only get it with the first one. No, they're within their right. I mean, some of them will blatantly say it. They'll say, listen, we're not going to make this available in stores, but it will be available in future Kickstarters. You'll always be able to get it if you back our Kickstarter, and we'll include it like as an add-on. So that's I don't think that's shady in any way. I think that's perfectly allowable. I don't see any problem with it. Now, the stretch goals. I knew that was something I was getting to. The stretch goals. I've used these. Stretch goals basically says, okay, if we sell a certain number or if we get a certain number of backers, or if we hit a certain dollar amount, or if we hit so many followers on our Facebook page, whatever, we're going to add something to the Kickstarter. And typically stretch goals are not extra money. It's like, so you've put your 50 in at the start of the Kickstarter, and maybe by the end of the Kickstarter, they've added 5 additional minis or 100 minis or whatever. You don't have, your amount doesn't go up. You have paid in like everyone else, and those stretch goals have just, because the company has gotten so many backers and the funding has gone up, it's lowering their price per mini or per whatever. And so it definitely, sorry. it definitely works. The stretch goals are beneficial. When I say they work for the buyer, for the backer. Now, the other problem is sometimes stretch goals just and this happens quite a bit. It's happening more and more lately that I'm seeing. A company will offer a Kickstarter, and then what they'll do is they'll have stretch goals, but the stretch goals is if we hit, say, 1,000 backers, we will add an expansion to the project, to the original product, that will only cost backers $20, whereas on the shelves in the store it's going to cost $25. Okay, so you can save $5, but the way Kickstarter originally started, that's not really a stretch goal. I guess yes it is. They're offering something when they've reached certain milestones, but stretch goals traditionally, for backers at least, backers have expected them to be something bonus, something extra. And I have noticed I won't say a lot, but I have noticed, a number of Kickstarters, and this has been going on for a few years. They will have stretch goals that give you something for nothing, and then they'll throw in there in the middle another stretch goal where if we hit this stretch goal, we're going to sell another, a bonus module or a pack of 10 exclusive miniatures, and you have to spend more money. It's not unlocked. It's unlocked in the sense that now you can spend more money, you can back more money. And, depending on how you feel about that, I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like it at all. I think exclusives and add-ons or stretch goals that add exclusives, they punish people who didn't discover your Kickstarter at the beginning. What they do is they it's almost becoming predator-like. There are people out there who buy they'll buy one or two, like a big board game that has like all these exclusive stretch goals that you'll never be able to get them again. They'll buy it, and then as soon as they get it, you can test me on this. As soon as certain big item board games are released and they start going out fulfillment, look on eBay and you'll see somebody selling their entire collection, and they'll write something like, "Yeah, I got it, but then I decided it was just I don't have time," or what. No, now that may be the case for some. But most of the time, when you see it up on eBay within a week or two of fulfillment, it's somebody doing that. They're going after the people who discovered the Kickstarter too late, and they're basically preying on them and saying, "Look, if you want it, I'll sell it to you, but there's a slight markup to cover my costs and shipping and all that stuff." I saw this specifically with a game called Seventh Continent. I think that was it. And this game came out with, multiple expansions and their little add-on packs and things like that. I think by the time you were done, this one box could fit in like three, it was like 3 boxes worth of stuff. And they only did a limited run of them. And now eventually later the demand was there, so they reran it. They scaled it down. They made it they reduced the game's content to like a cheaper box. But on eBay, you could not find that game for less than, I'm making this up, but it was like, I think it was like $700 for like a $200 game. And I'm sure there are people out there who paid that, who were like, I have got to have that game. And what happened was, what put me onto it was one of the game magazines that I read called, I'll put it in the comments of the video. It's a board game magazine from the UK that comes out every month. They had a real big write-up on it, and it sounded amazing. It actually is a pretty cool game. And I went out to eBay to look because the Kickstarter was done and they had already fulfilled it, and I was like, there's no way I'm paying that. As good as the game sounds, but you know what? I watched that. I do remember watching that eBay, and somebody bought it. Somebody paid like $700 for $200 worth of Kickstarted merchandise. Crazy. All right, so where am I going with this? Well, I really just want to talk about. I wanted to talk about Kickstarter, but I also wanted to give some thought as to rationalizing my use of Kickstarter, my support of Kickstarter, and also where I draw the line. One of the things I did forget, and I just noticed it on my sheet here, they sometimes this really burns me because I was a victim of this a few years ago. Some Kickstarters have what's called an early bird, and what it is if you get on in the first day or the first 2 days or 48 hours or some time limit, let's say they're selling this pen. They're backing that pen for $20, right? $20. Retail, it's going to be $30. They'll have they'll back as many of these as people back, right? There's no limit to this. You can pay $20 and you're going to get one of these pens. But what they'll do is they'll put something called an early bird. They'll say early bird, first 50 people who back get the pen for $10. And after that, they're gone, right? And it sounds cool. It's like, hey, man, I could get on there and maybe I'm going to watch it. I'm going to refresh. There is no refresh. You don't know when they're going to hit the launch button. That is totally up to the person running the Kickstarter, okay? It is literally, for those of you who've never run a Kickstarter, it is a button that says, I think it says launch. It's like go now or launch or whatever. You press it and boom, you're in business. So here's my thing. Years ago, there was an early bird that I wanted. It was some kind of electronics programming kit, and they said they were going to have an early bird on it that the first, I think it was the first 25 people could get it for like $50 or $100. It was a significant amount, right? All right. So they even went so far, and this is where they made the mistake. They went so far as to say, we're going to launch our Kickstarter at noon on Friday, right? So at 11:55, I was sitting there, refresh. And at about 11:50, and I wasn't doing it like every 10 seconds. I'd hit it refresh. It was like 11:55. I'd hit refresh. It's not up yet. At 11:56, I think it was, or maybe 11:57, they pushed the button. So that when I went to it at 11:58 and pushed, it had launched. All 25 of the early birds were gone. I mean, they were gone in 30 seconds. Now, you could argue that there were probably people like me who were sitting there going refresh, but this was not an item that, it was sort of one of those items that people just weren't gonna buy. I mean, it was something special to me that I thought would make my electronics hobby a little cooler. And they ultimately I believe, did they? No, they didn't fund. But here's what I think happened, and what I'm pretty confident happened. I think 5 or 10 minutes before they pushed that button, the creator went and emailed all his buddies, all his friends, and said, "You said you wanted one. If you want it for $10, which is half off, I'm gonna launch it at 5 minutes till noon, and you can get one of the early birds." And I know there are companies that run early birds, and they're legitimate because they'll run them for like 48 hours, the first 48 hours, and they won't put a number on it. They won't say, we're only selling 25 of these or 50 of these. They'll say, the first, whoever backs within the first 48 hours, you get this early bird special, right? Or they'll make the quantity so large that you can argue that like I did see an early bird recently that was like 250, and by the time I got there, there was plenty of time for me to be an early bird. But just be wary. When you see a Kickstarter that has an early bird and they have an extremely low number of early bird options, like 10 individuals or 20, I am a firm believer that there are Kickstarter creators out there who have done this, who have used Kickstarter to raise funds, but also to give their buddies or their friends, you're basically subsidizing. If you back that pen at $20, you are subsidizing that person's friends and family who got in early to get it for $10. It happens. Trust me, you're going to start noticing it like I do. I did complain to the guy. I even emailed the creator and I said, dude, you said noon. And on this day and age, everybody's computer and phone, the time is set automatically. Even Kickstarter is to a second. They're very accurate. I told him, I said, I think you pushed the button early, and some of your friends or family got on and got the early bird, because this was not a product that was being advertised or marketed. I happened to get wind of it through a very generic a friend of mine sent me a generic article that was in this little blurb about it or whatever, and I was just really anxious, and I thought if I could get 50 or 100 off, I would buy it. I ended up not backing it for that reason. He emailed me back and said, no, that didn't happen, and I was like, whatever, dude. So, fear of missing out, early birds, stretch goals, fulfillment issues, long wait times, need it versus want it. There are a whole lot of reasons to be wary of Kickstarter these days. It is not, it's stable enough these days that all the scammers and people who want to take advantage of backers, they know the secrets. They know how to take advantage of backers, get their money, do things that, it's not, taking advantage isn't the right word. They're not taking advantage. You choose to back it, right? But what they're doing is they've gotten very wise and savvy to making it hard for people to say no. Whether it's the fear of missing out or the exclusives. I don't know what's up with this paint. It is drying way. I'm not getting enough out of this bottle, I guess. That's what it is. I'm not able to get enough out of that bottle. A lot of creators are getting very, very savvy for squeezing every nickel they can out of backers using whatever methods they can. And then the backers have to sit there for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, and wait for their money to show up. And now, I don't know about you, I can count at least probably 5 or 6 Kickstarters that I've backed in my lifetime that did not fulfill. They raised the money, but for whatever reason, they did not deliver. And let me tell you, I've never lost more than maybe $25 on something like that. But I do know people that have lost hundreds and even thousands of dollars to Kickstarters that did not deliver. And that's really kind of scary if you think about it. I mean, people, money's money. I mean, we're not made of it, right? You give someone your money in good faith. You want to get what you have backed from them. And I'm not saying the number of Kickstarters out there that actually take people's money and run, that's very slim. I am well aware that there are issues with some Kickstarters where, for whatever reason, the funds ran out, or something in China happened, and a batch went bad, and now China's screaming for more money, and they don't have it. Right now, the shipping issue, the cost for a shipping container is so high. I truly believe we're going to start hearing more and more about some Kickstarters not fulfilling because their product is done. It's sitting over in China. It's just they can't afford to pay the shipping costs to get it over here. Because think about it. Kickstarter, when you say I need $20,000 to make 1,000 widgets, if you've done your math right, if you have a little bit of business savvy, you've hopefully patted in some like damages or maybe some lost in the mail type stuff. Nobody could have predicted that COVID was going to shut down manufacturing for such a long period of time, which delayed a lot of Kickstarters. Nobody was going to be able to predict the shortage of workers that would move finished material from factory to dock over the sea, off the boat to a truck and to your house. Nobody could have predicted that the cost to do that was going to go through the roof. And when I say through the roof, a friend of mine who ran a Kickstarter, he told me that it used to cost about $4,000 to have your own container. One of those big containers on a cargo ship, it used to be about $4,000. So if you printed, 20,000 board games, I'm making these numbers up, but whatever amount, and they could all fit on one cargo container, you paid $4,000 to ship it. And the companies that were doing this, they knew those costs, so they would build those into the Kickstarter, right? It's over $20,000 now for a cargo container. Now, it might have dropped a little bit, but just maybe a month ago, it was $20,000. Now, if you've run a Kickstarter and you've raised $50,000 and your cost is $30,000, which leaves you a $20,000 profit, right? Let's say that you shipping costs to your customer, right? You get it in your hands and you've got to box it up and let the postal service deliver it to wherever. All in, it's going to be about $30,000, which is going to leave you with $20,000. You're like, woohoo, $20,000, that's profit. And then your Chinese distributor says, oh, I'm sorry, it's not $4,000 for shipping, it's $20,000. Okay, now you had budgeted $4,000, which was out of that $30,000, right? So he tells you it's $20,000, so you've got to come up with $15,000. Well, you have $20,000, so you pay that $15,000, and how much do you have left over? $5,000 for all your hard work, for the product you created that's going out. If you have no business savvy whatsoever, I can tell you right now, businesses will not survive doing that. If a $5,000 profit on a $50,000 product run is all that's left over, These are companies that are probably never going to do that again. They're going to be like, there's no way. It's not worth it. And it's coming. You got to believe me when I tell you that right now there are Kickstarter creators out there who are sweating bullets because their Kickstarter ended right before COVID or during COVID, but the shipping issues weren't known. They got their money. They sent the manufacturing off to China. China finally got going on its manufacturing. It's producing. And then they got the bill for what it's going to take to get it from China to the US or wherever. And they're sweating bullets because they didn't account for it and they don't have enough money left over from whatever their Kickstarter. Some Kickstarter creators run it very tight. If they need $10,000 to produce it and they make $11,000 on the Kickstarter, that's what they did. And a lot of people who are inexperienced, and I used to be one of these people. A lot of people who are running Kickstarters do not understand how to add in profit margin plus, loss, which is theft or damage and things like that. They don't understand fulfillment costs that can increase drastically all of a sudden. I suspect a lot of them are going to go to like credit cards to pay, that because they want to get their backers whatever it is they owe them. And it's kind of sad because I think a lot of them are going to get in debt. They're going to, rather than get out of debt and make a profit on their Kickstarter, they're going to end up having to pay money out of their own pockets to get the fulfillment done. One of the reasons I have not been painting this is it's very cold down here in the basement and the paint is just not drying. It's not drying. And it's just, man, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I may have to make this a two-parter. Actually, I won't do that to you. What I'll do is I'll finish it up and then I'll append some photos at the end of the video showing you the final thing. Basically, all I did was paint blue and some silver on some of the bells. I've got to do his crown and whatever the embers are in his little brazier that he's swinging there, whatever that thing's called. I also want to do a two-tone on his robes, and I can't do that just yet. I will put a link in the video description so you can check this video or this product out if you want to look at getting one. Again, normally when I do paint and ramble, I tend to shoot to try to finish a mini. It's not looking like I'm going to finish this one. I probably should have painted this upstairs where it's a little warmer. And I like working in my basement now. All right, so let me pitch this up. So again, I haven't solved any problems during this paint and ramble. I wanted to talk about Kickstarter. For a long time, I've wanted to get some of this off my chest. One of the reasons I thought about doing this was as I mentioned, I've been running, I've done a number of Kickstarters. I did one with a friend in Texas, but that one was non-gaming. So gaming Kickstarters, I've done 3. I did one a year and maybe 2 years ago called Tavern Tales, and that one fulfilled on time. And now I've done 2 for Delver Magazine, Delver 1 and Delver 2, which Delver 2 is in the wild right now going out to backers. And I'm getting ready to launch Delver 3 at the end of this month. And one of the funniest things to me about running a Kickstarter is from the start, I told my backers, you're not going to wait 3 months, 6 months, to get your magazine. I intentionally wrote Delver 1 before I kickstarted it. Now, I did have stretch goals that would add more pages to it, but the basic magazine itself was done. I even included screen captures of the thumbnails of the pages, which you couldn't read, but I was like, here it is, it's done. And I'm sure there were people who were like, is it really? I can't read that. But, I gave them the thumbnails. And I said, here's how it's going to work. The Kickstarter ends. I know how many copies I'm going to need to order. I'm going to immediately send the file that's finished, plus any stretch goals. As stretch goals would hit, I would write those and send those to my editor and get those cleaned up, so that when the Kickstarter ended, it wasn't the next day. It was 2 days after Kickstarter ended. I sent the file to my printer. My printer had a 2-week turnaround at maximum. They said it could be less, but it'll be 2 weeks. That Kickstarter, that Delver issue came in about a week and a half after I sent the file. And then I immediately started sending it to backers. And the first comments I started getting from backers was, holy cow, didn't this Kickstarter just end like, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago? Yeah. In most cases, it was 3. I wasn't messing around. I have done enough Kickstarters in my day that I don't like to wait. I don't like to wait a year. I don't like to wait 6 months. I will, but for a magazine or something like that, I am a big believer that, not making the backer wait is the way to go. Now, unfortunately, that's not the rule. And I'm probably going to step on toes and irritate some people out there when I say this, but when you back a gaming book, especially like 5e gaming books, on Kickstarter, and I've written for some of these companies, and they're good companies. They're reliable. Kobold. I write for Jetpack 7. There's a lot of companies out there that produce books, accessory books for D&D 5th edition. But what a lot of people, I don't think, realize is when you press the back button on a lot of those products, nothing has been done yet, or very little has been written. Usually what those companies have done is they've gathered a group of writers, and they've negotiated with the writers to say, okay, we're going to do this book. We need you to write this 25-page chapter or this 30-page adventure or whatever. We need you to create 30 new creatures, whatever they're asking for. What will you charge us for that? And so if they ask me, I would say, okay, this is what I'm going to charge. And they would say that's acceptable, and they'll add it. And then what they do is once they get all the writers' quotes back in, they add it up. They add in their profit margin plus their printing costs plus whatever else they need to budget in. And that becomes the Kickstarter backer goal, right? So that when the backers go, ooh, I want that, they click OK. A lot of backers, I think, don't understand that book isn't done. It hadn't even been started yet, or it's maybe 20 pages of it or 50 pages of it. Once the funds have been delivered to the publisher, that's when the writers get the go-ahead, start writing. Now, you are not only at the mercy of the printing company and the shipping company, you're at the mercy of the writers. And I speak from experience because I'm one of those. Writers write at different speeds. Some writers can crank out 10 pages in a day. Some writers can't crank out 5 pages in a month. And so I'm very, very wary of backing books that have large number of collaborative writers. And a lot of times they'll advertise that. They'll say, oh, here's our writing staff. And you'll be like, okay, if it hits, more than 3 or 4 writers, think about herding cats. I mean, that's what a publisher's having to do, right? Even if you get the best writers around, you can't predict life. Sometimes writers have, life things that cause them to be slow on delivery. And so a lot of times stuff like that is delayed. It's delayed because it's delayed being sent to the printer because it hasn't been laid out. Why hasn't it been laid out? Because not all the written content has been turned in yet. It happens, and it's just part of the game. But for me, I decided, no, we're not going to do that. Now, my books are mainly random tables and things like that, stuff that I can have edited, but they don't require a lot of eyeballs. They don't require a bevy of writers. All right, I do hire occasionally a writer here or there to help me or an editor to do something for me, but as a rule, I don't. And for that reason, I can turn around my Kickstarters very quickly. Delver 2 the Kickstarter ended on the 15th of October. I got all the books. There were multiples of boxes. I got the boxes in by November 2nd. Today is the 18th. I just sent out like the last 20 or 30 of them. My fulfillment is 92% done, I think. And whatever that 8%, what that is it's people who haven't submitted the surveys with their addresses, so I can send them what I owe them. So for all practical purposes, I've done as much as I can. Now I'm waiting on backers to do their part. Long story short, what I'm telling you is, if you're going to back a Kickstarter, what you want to do is, do your due diligence. You're going to want to investigate. Has this person done additional Kickstarters? If so, research them. Check the comments. Look at when their deliverable was supposed to come, and then go to the comments and see and the updates and see when they're actually shipping them out. Not every Kickstarter is good about providing updates, so you may have to do some hunting. Ultimately, we all do that gut check kind of thing. Do we trust this person? And that's dangerous. Very dangerous to trust your gut about a product. It's your money. You want to be careful. And obviously, you want to weigh all those things I mentioned. Do you need it or do you want it? There's a big difference. How long are you willing to wait for it? Are you buying into it because they're offering you something that you won't be able to get later? Does it matter? If you can get the core item later in the store or ordering online and not that exclusive item, is that a big deal to you? If it's not a big deal, maybe you wait. The item's going to come out at some point anyway. You might have to pay $5 or $10 more than the Kickstarters did, but you didn't have to give that money up front. There you go. All right. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm starting to lose my voice. After about an hour, my voice starts going. It's always done this. I appreciate you joining me for these paint and rambles. I actually had a couple people come up to me at the Mace convention in Charlotte this last weekend, and they told me that they really enjoyed just hearing someone else's thoughts on various subjects. So appreciate y'all telling me that, and I'll throw this back and say, if you have a topic that you want to hear me ramble on about, I'm certainly willing to do it. That's if I have anything to actually say about it. If you ask me to talk about, women's tennis, I don't know anything about women's tennis, so it's going to be a very short paint and ramble. But gaming related, if it's something that I feel qualified to give my opinion on, I will certainly do it. And as always, these things are always my opinion, not stating fact. Feel free to correct me at any time in the comments. All right, I will get this thing painted up and finished and then post this video for everyone to share or everyone to see. Thanks for joining me. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. I'll be back next week with another paint and ramble. Everybody, take care.